Of Kentucky's Voice. Jim Waters here with you, and glad to be joined today by my wonderful co-host Bob Scott, who you can hear on here frequently on this program, and you'll be on tomorrow. And Bob, thanks for joining us today here, and I'm pretty excited about having you on here. We haven't had a chance to do this for a while, so welcome, my friend.
No, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And it's been too long, Jim. I always relish the opportunity to get on and talk everything politics, and sometimes we have a chance to talk about other items as
Yep.
well. And I don't know where we're going to go with this show today,
Well,
but I am excited, and I do know we have several really great topics that folks are going to want to stay tuned in for that's going to be of interest to them.
Well, Bob Scott, Friday is Independence Day, and do you see my tie here, buddy? And I see your
You see my
decked out.
shirt? Come on now.
I do, man. Get up there. There we go. Yeah, be bold, man. Be a bold Bob today. That's what we need.
Yeah, for those on the radio that can't see it, I have a Star Spangled Banner shirt on in honor of the upcoming. I'll be wearing this tomorrow. I probably will worship, but then again, I may not for
Well, being
tomorrow's
on
show.
the radio, Bob, in your studio, as long as your wife's okay there with it, we're fine with it.
Yes,
But
thank
hey,
you.
anyhow, folks, Friday is Independence Day. We'll talk about why we should celebrate more now than ever before. And I think you'll want to stay tuned for that. Also, I know Bob has some special guests tomorrow. We'll get to that as well in this show and give him a chance to preview that. Also, the state auditor, Allison Ball, who some have talked about as a possible gubernatorial candidate as well, who's been a rising star in the Republican Party in Kentucky for a while now. She's now the state auditor. She's out with results of her audit of the huge state bureaucracy known as the Kentucky Department of Education. Misnamed, actually, because I'm not sure how many kids they actually educate. And could the big, beautiful bill meet President Trump's deadline and land on his desk by July 4th? It's passed in the Senate, but will the House concur with the changes? But first, the garbage man can or can he? On stage with several high-profile conservatives behind him this week, Republican Nate Morris entered the race for retiring U.S. Senate Mitch McConnell's seat with a message: it's time to take out the trash. Quote, Mitch McConnell has been in the Senate since before the internet was created. That's crazy to think about. This from the Louisville Career-Journal covering this story. Morris is the third notable Republican to enter the closely watched race, joining seven-term U.S. Representative Andy Barr and former Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron. Each one of them has worked to put some distance between themselves and McConnell. And, Mitch McConnell, towering figure, like him or hate him, you have to admit he's been around a long time. And he's certainly influenced politics here in Kentucky. You know, sometimes when I say he's been a towering figure, some people say, well, you're promoting him. No, I'm just saying the truth. I mean, he's been here for decades in office.
Yeah.
Some would say too long. And
I'd probably be one of those that would say too long, Jim, but that's okay.
Well, he's and this from the Career Journal's coverage: a towering figure in bluegrass politics who's become a toxic brand in the party due to his icy relationship with President Donald Trump. And so the fact is that Nate Morris, Bob Scott, that Nate Morris has been particularly harsh in his criticism of Mitch McConnell, certainly more so than the other candidates in this race. Now, they've been mildly rebuked Mitch McConnell for some specific things, but Nate Morris really has been pretty tough on him. What are your so Charlie Kirk was here on Monday, and Charlie introduced Nate Morris. I mean, that's the only way you have a 10 a.m. event on Monday and get a standing room only crowd in Shepherdsville, Kentucky.
That's right.
Is if you're going to have something big happen on the political stage. Well, I think this is pretty big, Bob Scott.
Yeah.
And what are your
agree.
thoughts on this event? You were there. Give us your
was there.
thoughts. And you've had a
Yeah,
couple
no,
of days. Just briefly, your thoughts.
I was there, and I was privileged to do some coverage for our network here and have a chance to share my thoughts. And first of all, it was a standing room only event. I've talked to several political operatives since then that has been to many events at the Parquet Center, in Shepherdsville, and they said they have never, ever seen it packed out like it was. And it was. I mean, I talked to John Hodgson, state representative from here in Louisville, District 36. He was one of the organizers for the event, which was kind of a surprise in its own right, but not really.
Why are you surprised about that, Bob? What's the...
Well, I'm just the only thing I was really surprised about, I guess, is he got right out front. On it. A lot of folks will, and there were several folks from different representing different state parties in our state that are taking a wait and see approach. One even told me, we're not doing any kind of endorsements. We're going to let the primary play itself out. Mm-hmm. Then we'll get from behind whoever the people choose.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what some of the other folks in this race are saying about Nate Morris's getting into it, Bob. U.S. Representative Andy Barr, as you mentioned, former Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, who are also seeking the nomination, and all of them are jockeying big time for Donald Trump's endorsement. Barr told reporters in Washington after Morris's announcement, the bottom line is I'm the only candidate in this race who's actually delivering for President Trump's agenda. Well, he's in Congress, of course, so he does have an advantage there since Mitch McConnell can't say that. He's not running again. He said these other candidates like to talk about it, but they're fake MAGA. Now, I don't know. I think that term just seems so oxymoronic. I mean, how can you be you're either...
Yes.
I mean, it's hard to be fake MAGA, okay, with Donald Trump calling people out who are fake, but maybe that's a issue for a different day.
Let me throw in here real quick, because they opened the event, over in Shepherdsville with a video by Donald Trump Jr., in which Nate Morris actually did the initial, campaign launch with Donald Trump Jr.
Yeah. Well, that matters. Now, Cameron also chimed in. He said, quote, Nate Morris talks a big game about being America first, pro-Trump, successful businessman and conservative outsider. Problem is his record doesn't back any of that up. Today, when Nate makes an appearance on Charlie Kirk's show, hopefully he'll provide some answers to these serious questions. And Daniel Cameron put out a whole list of talking and attack points on Nate Morris. This is really going to get interesting. In fact, I thought Colonel Pamela Stevenson, current Democratic state representative who has zero chance of winning this seat, but runs anyhow. I always wonder about these people that do this. She probably has some other motivation. Certainly gives her some name recognition, maybe for some kind of race down the line here in the state. But she said, quote, the Republicans lining up to replace Mitch McConnell will vote exactly the same way he did. Quote, they were his interns. Now they're his clones. And I didn't realize this, but apparently, according to the Career Journal, Barr, Cameron, and Morris all served as interns for Mitch McConnell previously. I didn't know Nate Morris had been an intern. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's news to me as well.
Well, anyhow, this segment's moving along, and I want to make sure we get to the ads. Campaign ads are key, especially in primaries. They can be really, really important. And Nate Morris has released his first ad, and this is a winner, folks. I'm not endorsing him, or I'm not telling you to vote for it, but this ad. His background with Rubicon as a trash guy, as a garbage collecting guy. Check this ad out. Go ahead and play clip 1.
It's garbage day in Kentucky. And thanks to Mitch McConnell, things have gotten dirty. The Bluegrass State is sick and tired of cleaning up career politicians' messes. I'm Nate Morris, a Trump America First conservative, and I'm here to take out the trash. I'm a 9th-generation Kentuckian, born to a single mom on food stamps, raised in a union household. I'm the product of Bluegrass grit. I borrowed 10 grand to start a business, created thousands of jobs, and took it public, valued at $2 billion, as one of the biggest trash companies in America. So I know a little bit about garbage. And Mitch McConnell, he's trash Trump. And for over 40 years, he's been dumping on us. Amnesty for millions of illegals. Rhino judges in courtrooms across America joining Democrats on gun control. Billions spent on Ukraine and other foreign wars, and trillions more on Biden's massive spending bill, all while becoming one of the richest senators in Washington. and now he's calling it quits and thinks he can stick us with one of his puppets instead.
My mentor, leader Mitch McConnell, I'm with him because his legacy is big.
Senator Mitch McConnell, and it's been a great privilege and honor to know him, and I'm proud to call him a friend. I'm proud to call him a mentor.
They'll betray President Trump and sell us out. Not on my watch. We've let the garbage pile up in Washington, D.C. for far too long. I'm running for Senate to help President Trump clean up the mess. I'm not a politician, and I've never run for office. And I will never stop fighting for the place that made me the man I am today. I'm Nate Morris. Let's dump career politicians and take out the trash in Washington.
Donald Trump Jr. called that ad one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, and that's quoting him directly. But that ad reminds me, Bob Scott, of the one that McConnell himself ran that really got him elected to the U.S. Senate in the first place. Play that clip, and then when we come back on the next segment...
was to find Dee Huddleston and get him back to work. Huddleston was missing big votes on Social Security, the budget, defense, even agriculture. Huddleston was skipping votes but making an extra $50,000 giving speeches. I just missed him when Dee skipped votes for his $1,000 Los Angeles speech.
Let's go, boys. We got him now.
I was close at Dee's $2,000 speech in Puerto Rico.
Me to Dee Huddleston. Thank you very much. Come on.
We can't find Dee. Maybe we ought to let him make speeches and switch to Mitch for senator.
I mean, those bloodhounds on the beaches of Puerto Rico, wherever he was at.
Both powerful ads.
When we come back, Bob Scott, I want to talk about a lot of more politicians running as outsiders who've never held office before. What's that all about? Stay with us here on Kentucky's Voice. Jim Waters with my friend Bob Scott.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Jim Waters back here on Hump Day's version of Kentucky's Voice. We're live on the radio, and you can catch us later on TV today, this show. Watch us there on WBNA Channel 21 at 4 p.m. this afternoon Eastern Time. Love to have you join us. Also on the Kentucky's Voice text line at 502-571-0970. Want to hear what you think about the Senate race, and just a couple more points on that and I'm joined today by my co-host Bob Scott. And Bob, we see more and more folks running for higher office. I'm talking about higher office, federal offices, who have never held office before. That used to be really frowned upon, because there was the idea that you needed the experience of working, in a legislative situation, if you're running for that, or learning how to govern, or learning how that works, and having some experience at maybe what we would call some lower levels, or local levels, or state levels. But that seems to be pretty much thrown out the door. I think Donald Trump has had a lot to do with that, don't you? Running as successfully running as having never
took
held
the
office before.
words right out of my mouth, and I think that's what honestly ticked off a lot of the establishment Republicans, is the fact that he jumped in front to the front of the line instead of quote unquote paying his dues.
Yeah, he was not the anointed one, certainly. Beginning, if you remember back, I remember when Rand Paul announced his run for president here back in 2016, and he was considered a favorite early on, and then Donald Trump sort of sucked all the oxygen out of the race, which really pushed him out, and that may be what some of the problem between them. I don't know, who knows. But anyhow, we see Nate Morris here, also in the same situation. Here's a guy who's been a successful businessman. We saw this with Matt Bevin, who ran as governor, financed his own campaign largely, ticked off the establishment really in both parties, did the same thing. Nate Morris, we see him following sort of the same playbook, and Matt Bevin won. Of course, he lost his re-election, but that wasn't really because he hadn't run before, although maybe some of that was because of a lack of experience in dealing with the legislature, dealing with government. I don't know. There may be some of that there, but I think most of it was just on his personality. But you see these guys that have run and been successful. And what's going on with this? What are voters saying when they vote for people that haven't held office before and are running for an office like a U.S. Senate seat or president?
I think Americans are sick and tired of politicians and politics in general. I think they want to see someone that's going to be a statesman, someone that's going to truly put America first, hence the Trump slogan, Make America Great Again. These are all things that really tapped into a mood, in our country, and where you saw a lot of non-traditionalists or non-traditional, I guess, groups to come and support Donald Trump when he ran. You see Latinos, you see a lot of black males that have switched, in that direction, and young people, Generation Z. They're another very important group that helped get President Trump over the hurdle, if you will. Charlie Kirk had a lot to do with them, reaching out to them, and I can't understate his effect and why it was important, and why there was a huge turnout that we were talking about in the first segment over in Shepherdsville for Nate Morris. I guarantee you, because there were several people going into that event, and I'm not saying on site, but people that I had talked to that had never heard of Nate Morris. Well, guess what? Now that Charlie Kirk is formally behind him, they are starting to learn exactly who he is, and he's going to have an impact. Not to mention the fact, money makes the world go round. You have to have a big war chest to run for any office.
Right. So do you think? So you brought up a couple of good points there. I want to drill down a little bit on. One is, a statesman versus a politician. Now I think that's a really important distinction, don't you?
I do.
People who are willing to, and we used to say, fall on your sword if necessary. In other words, most politicians, their number one priority is to get reelected.
Yes.
Okay. And yet, if you don't, and if you come across, and once in a while, it's rare, but once in a while you come across a politician who is willing to make tough decisions, provide the needed leadership, and isn't constantly on this getting reelected binge, and they tend to do very well because of that. I think about Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was not. He was willing to make the tough decisions whether or not he got reelected. You kind of, he said, I don't have to have this job to be fulfilled in my life, and I think it's rare, though, to have those kinds of politicians, and even if they say they are in the beginning, a lot of times once they get elected, they get to Washington, something happens. We heard Rand Paul, when he ran for office, talk about term limits and how he was in favor of that. And we heard Representative Ron Lewis famously several years ago from the 2nd District down representing Bowling Green in that part of the state, made term limits a big part of his platform and campaign, and yet he was in that office for how many terms? Many terms.
Right.
So something happens there, but a true statesman willing to, if you will, do what's right, no matter what the establishment, no matter what the party says. We need more of those kind of people, not only in Washington, but I think in Frankfurt too, even at the local level. We need people willing to say, hey, they may pull out, the teachers unions may pull out all the stops against me, but I'm going to support education choice or reform or whatever it is. We just don't see much of that.
Term limits is a big, beautiful idea. That should happen, but probably sadly never will. I think it's been used as a talking point, quite frankly, to mislead people and tell people what they want to hear, which is really what a politician does, for the most part. And use it as a wedge, if you will, to get elected, especially if they're running against an incumbent. And then in a very unpopular incumbent, someone like a Mitch McConnell, who, of course, isn't running again, but it's a tactical thing, But the problem is getting everybody to agree to do it. Because no one, once they get there,
nobody wants to be the first.
They don't want to give up their power base, that they acquire when they do that.
Well, folks, if you're enjoying this show today, I want you to support our efforts here. And you can do this in many ways. One is to let us know what you think. 502-571-0970 is our Kentucky's Voice text line. And, we'll get to your text today. I promise before this show's over with. We'll try to get those out. But also support us. You can give and donate to this program. You can, if you're a business owner, even a small business owner, you want to increase your business. You want to grow your business. I'd love to talk to you about that. Get a hold of us here, and you can reach out to me at jim.waters@kyvoice.org. Would love to follow up, and I'll follow up with you right away. I'll follow up with you within 24 hours. How's that? And we'll get something on the calendar. But we need this type of program. We need a conservative voice in the media in Kentucky, particularly in Louisville, with great thinkers like Bob Scott. I learned so much. I learned a lot from Bob, and he's staying on top of things. But Bob Scott, your show tomorrow, quickly, we've got about a minute left in this segment. Tell us, give us a preview of, you're going to be hosting tomorrow, and it's going to be a great show.
Yeah, it's exciting. My special guest is going to be Michael Burns. He's a former special operator in the United States Air Force. Embedded a lot with different types of special force units, from SEALs to everything else in between. He's now a contractor, but you might have seen him. He's gone viral. He was walking down the street. I think he was out in Salt Lake City, walking down the street, and a young guy came up. He's a well-known social media influencer, and just asked him. And this was before the Iranian bombing happened. Well, to make a long story short, he accurately predicted everything that was going to happen before the bombings happened. I mean, to a T, that video has garnered well over 16 million hits. So Michael will be on the show tomorrow.
That'd be great. Great show coming up tomorrow. That's at 11 o'clock tomorrow with the one and only Bob Scott, award-winning Kentucky's Voice radio program. I'm speaking it by faith. It's going to happen. We're going to win all kinds of awards before this is over with. It's great radio, great TV, too. We're looking good on TV today, Bob Scott. Thanks for the help. I needed all the help I can get. But join us this afternoon at 4 o'clock for a replay of this program. Coming up, the Senate passes the big, beautiful bill. But will the House concur? Don't go away. Stay with us on Kentucky's Voice.
back to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
And welcome back on Hump Day, the Kentucky's Voice program here, 11 to noon each weekday. Thanks for joining us. We've got lots of guest hosts and lots of things ahead that I'm excited about. You're going to hear from different folks, different perspectives, and we want to hear from your perspective as well. What do you think about the show? What do you think about what we're talking about? You have an opinion, you have an idea, you have a show topic, a possible topic. Give us a call, 502, or well, not call, text us, 502-571-0970. Not taking text yet, but that's the Kentucky's Voice text line. And this off our text line today, you guys are full of it. I will paraphrase. There's only one clear candidate, and that's Daniel Cameron. Well, you know, that's your opinion. I mean, this is America, Bob Scott. We're wearing patriotic stuff today.
Well,
this is the United States of America, okay? You have a right to your opinion.
And I don't think we've endorsed anybody, Jim. I could be wrong about that.
We haven't, and but this guy obviously has, so we appreciate that, and you know, we appreciate your view. And look, you didn't give me any reasons there about why he's the only clear candidate, but so that's something that happens a lot of times. If you're going to make a statement like that, you got to give the evidence of that. You know, you got to back it up. And so anyhow, we appreciate that. 502-571-0970. Want to hear from you what you think about this Senate race. But I want to move on here to the big, beautiful bill. The House Senate has passed it, very narrowly passed it. It took J.D. Vance, the vice president, who came and cast a tie-breaking vote for the bill, 51-50. And it's a massive bill. It's a massive tax and spending bill passed yesterday. And tie-breaking was necessary because 3 Republican senators voted against it, including Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. There were some senators who voted, some Republicans voted for this, Bob Scott, who made it clear they weren't all that enthusiastic about it. Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska was one of those. She said she is fully expecting the House to make changes and send it back. That's. I mean, you know, but then you have to ask, and this is the politician at work. Why did you vote for this if you didn't believe in it? At least you may not agree with Rand Paul, but he's not going to vote for a bill and then say, "I wish this isn't a very good bill, but I voted for it anyhow." At least you know he's not going to do that. And I think this is really a lot of political bull, really, if you ask me. But she said, my people are hurting. We need the tax breaks in here. Well, then the bill, if you support it, support it. If you don't, don't. You know,
right.
that we saw a lot of waffling on this.
And let me tell you, too, Jim, I think a little bit of pork was thrown in Alaska's direction, you know. They wouldn't do that in Washington. No,
Bob
of
Scott,
course
would
not.
they? That wouldn't happen.
No politician would ever do that.
I find it hard to believe that what you're telling me.
Yeah. So, and I think that's where she's saying that she fully anticipates some changes to be made on the House side, and I think that for sure is going to happen. I don't. I'll be surprised if they. Come to some kind of agreement and have it ready by July 4th.
You're right. Actually, Rand Paul did criticize this vote by Murkowski, saying that she was against the bill but voted for it after she got hundreds of millions of dollars for her state. At least $50 billion was added for hospital funds in the end. We don't have any of that money. All of it's borrowed. All that spending will have to be borrowed, and this bill will lead to a much greater deficit over time. I don't believe it's fiscally responsible. Now, you may not agree. I mean, there are going to be people who don't agree, and, of course, Trump is upset with Paul and others who have voted against this. But my point here is that he didn't. He's right to call her out for that. I think he's right. You know, to say if you're against it, vote against it. Senator McConnell voted for it, the bill, and there's a lot in here. I mean, we've got tax cuts, we've got border security and defense. The bill pours $150 billion into defense spending. Almost $50 billion for border security, including, get this, 700 miles of border wall, 900 miles of river barriers, high-tech sensors, using technology to secure our borders. I love that. The tax cuts, these make the 2017 tax cuts permanent. There's a few minor changes there, but energy and jobs, it scales back Biden's clean energy tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act. It prioritizes coal, natural gas, fossil fuel production to boost domestic energy and jobs. Spending cuts to offset the tax cuts. The bill tightens eligibility for Medicaid and SNAP, requiring able-bodied adults up to age 64 to work or volunteer 80 hours a month. Now, I think, Bob Scott, when you talk about how this is going to affect Kentucky, I think the Medicaid issue is going to have the biggest impact if it passes like it does. And there are two main things here. One is tightening up the eligibility for Medicaid, which when Steve Beshear was in office, he used Obama care to expand Medicaid so that many people here in Kentucky who were actually in the private insurance marketplace previously all of a sudden became eligible to be on the government dole, and they left the private marketplace and they came on the government dole, and taxpayers are paying the bill. This is going to reverse a lot of that. It's going to require folks to work or to go to school or to be training, doing something in order to receive benefits. But the other thing here is there's a $50 billion rural hospital fund to ease the transition. I'm not really excited about this part of this because hospitals in Kentucky are increasing their Medicaid numbers. They're artificially increasing these numbers in order to get more money from the federal government. And I think this is wrong to do this, but this is the political reality of getting a bill like this passed. So I think there's going to be some impact for Kentucky here. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's the same old. And it's not just Democrats. You've pointed out correctly that there are some Republicans that are against it, but it's a lot of fear mongering going on in this. I'm not going to sit here and say I have all the answers to this bill because that would be a complete lie. But a lot of folks that I have talked to said it's going to do just what they tried to honestly do and did do to a great extent with DOGE, try to clean up some of the messes that you were just talking so eloquently about. Getting the pork and the fat out of government spending.
And you know, Bob, this can't be a blank check forever. We can't, we expanded. There's 1 in 3 Kentuckians on Medicaid.
Yeah.
And it is one of the,
it's insane.
When you put the federal and state dollars together and you combine the spending on Medicaid in Kentucky, it's by far the single largest spending item in our state. And, higher than education, more than any other, more than pensions, more than anything else we're doing here. And yet we've had a governor, really both him and his father, Andy Beshear and his father, who will go to the mat to defend this kind of wasteful spending, this kind of bad policy, and it's you and I that are paying for this, folks.
Yeah.
You're paying you're paying the bill here. This is not free stuff. It's free to people who are getting it, but it's not free. It's costing, and I think this is it's time. This is our opportunity, and this is what Donald Trump has done. I think that's so important. He's created the environment, the opportunity, the possibility of reining in some spending, reining in these bad ideas. And I know that all of Kentucky's congressional delegation has talked about the need to reform Medicaid. I don't think there's any disagreement there. So even on that, even though there may be some folks that vote against this eventually, there's widespread agreement that the Medicaid issue in Kentucky is a huge problem, and it's going to continue to be unless we rein it in. Folks, Medicaid was created back in the 1960s. And this is a teaching moment just for a moment here. Medicaid is a great example of what happens to almost every government program that's started. Good intentions. This program had good intentions. It was meant to provide a safety net for those temporarily out of work and for the truly disabled, for the truly indigent who had no other way of getting health care, getting taken care of. That's what it was intended to be. It was intended to serve a relatively small percentage, an amount of the population, and yet it has grown to be one of the biggest government programs in America. And this is what happens with government programs. Thomas Jefferson said, the natural inclination of government is to grow and liberty to cede, to decline. And when you take more of taxpayer dollars in wasteful spending, you're taking our property. You're taking what belongs to us. You're taking what we have earned. And Bob Scott, I think this is a teaching moment to say, we need to learn from this and realize that when we start a government program, it needs to have strict parameters. We need to have a way of reining in it. That's what Doge, if you look at what Doge has done, right? I think a lot of these programs, even USAID, and I saw where George W. Bush and Barack Obama both are coming out criticizing, the end of that program, even though, and they did not acknowledge that the important things that really do matter in USA that we still need to keep are still going to be done. They're just going to be done by the State Department. Why do we have to have a huge bureaucracy, is what Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and others have said. Why do we have to have a huge bureaucracy to get this done? If we can figure out how to do it, isn't that what's important? Not the bureaucracy, not keeping people on the payroll who shouldn't be there, who aren't doing anything, who aren't contributing. I mean, that's essentially what's happened here. But that's another example of how Donald Trump is ticked off the establishment in both parties. You have Barack Obama, Democratic establishment, Republican establishment, Bush, coming out criticizing Trump for ending this program, claiming it's going to cost lives without any evidence here. There's no evidence.
No, there's none whatsoever. And as we've talked about, Doge has uncovered billions of dollars of corruption, waste, and fraud that has been spent. And let me ask you a question, Jim. Is it okay that 1.5 million illegals are on our dime or on our Medicaid plans? Is that right? I mean, I don't think so.
No, and I don't think so. And I think Americans, that's one of the major reasons why Donald Trump got elected. He has done what he said he's going to do. And by the way, did you check out the alligator Alcatraz? How cool is that? Did you see that? I mean, you talk about a built-in security, deterrent to escape, right?
Yes.
I mean, nobody. I don't care how illegal you are. Nobody wants to get eaten up by alligators in the pond escaping from it. That's even worse, Bob Scott, than the original Alcatraz was. The main concern of guys who
far worse.
The main concern of Al Capone and his crowd who were housed at Alcatraz in San Francisco was that we just drown, in the San Francisco Bay because there was no way he could swim to shore. But this is even worse. One thing to drown, it's another thing to get eaten up by alligators, and then to put this as close as they did to an airport where, like Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida said, we can go 2,000 yards or whatever it is and send them on a plane back to wherever they came from. This is pretty ingenious idea. I think it's pretty interesting. But hey, we'll leave it there with that. Stay with us here on Kentucky's Voice. I do want to mention the audit done by the state auditor, Allison Ball, of the Kentucky Department of Education, coming up on our final segment of Kentucky's Voice. Stay with us here. We'd love to hear from you today on our text line at 502-571-0970. Tell us what you think about the Senate race, Doge, Medicaid. Want to hear from you.
Back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
And our final segment here on the Hump Day version of Kentucky's Voice Radio and television, folks. Yeah, you can see us this afternoon. Just watch the parts that I'm on. Just tune out when Bob's on. No, I'm kidding. I said Bob has a voice for radio, or has a face for radio, right? But no, he's actually got a really cool shirt on today, and I wish we could see more of it. I like it, Bob. Bob Scott with us, and joining us for this final segment, Tom Fallbush, the award-winning co-host of the Thursday edition, usually, but Bob's going to be in here tomorrow. Anyhow,
man, I should have had my flag.
The hat, he's got his hat on there, and he's looking all Trumpish here today. So we're glad to have you guys with us. But we're also very glad, and I have to say I'm very glad, having worked on Kentucky's public education system, bringing reform, bringing change, bringing attention to what's happened in our public education system. Our state auditor has stepped up and released and has done an audit of our Kentucky Department of Education, released the results of that, and has not only that, identified widespread improvements needed across the agency. Imagine that, Bob Scott and Tom Fallbush. We have an education system that needs widespread improvement, especially beginning in the bureaucracy that runs the whole thing. Yeah. Kentucky's children deserve to receive the education they need to be competitive in the real world, was her first statement, which tells me she's right on track. She's thinking about this the right way. Allison Ball said this examination provides a clear path forward for student success, parent accessibility, and teacher support in all of Kentucky's schools. It can serve as a guiding document for Commissioner Fletcher as he continues his work to improve the state of public education and across the Commonwealth. So what happened was last year in the legislative session in 2024, there was legislation passed, House Bill 825, that required this audit. Legislators have become so frustrated with the education system that our Republican-led legislature passed legislation requiring an audit to review why our system is failing, why they said underperforming. I'm going to say failing. If you're underperforming in our education system, you're failing. You're not making the mark. You're not meeting the standards. And this audit, they work side by side with one of the most prominent one of the most prominent auditing entities that audits education systems in Kentucky. And they looked at the KDE's activities from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2024. And I just want to give you guys a couple of things here, and then we can jump into this. Here it is. KDE erroneously allowed over $250 million in SEEK funds to lapse instead of reallocating those funds to cover what they called funding shortfalls, including the most recently complained of shortfall this past January. So in other words, the system is complaining about the legislators underfunding them, but it's all political. It's all designed to paint a picture of a legislature that is stingy, taxpayers that aren't doing their part to fund education. And here they had $250 million in SEEK funds sitting in their accounts that they did not properly expend. They didn't properly spend it. Yeah. Also, KD's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts have been a waste of money, and there has been no noticeable difference in student outcomes. I really like this. Tom Fallbush, I really like this because everybody's been talking about DEI, but then we look at the performance of our Black, minority, Hispanic, low-income students in Kentucky, and as the auditor said, this has made no difference. All this spending, all this woke ideology, all this focus on DEI, going to the mat to protect it, it's not made a difference.
Yeah, public school systems are just huge bureaucracies there to benefit the teachers and the bureaucracy itself. It's not there to benefit the kids or the parents, and you can just see it. The proof of what a system's about is what it does. And all it does is enrich the bureaucrats that run it and give cushy jobs to the teachers that are in it. Now there are some good teachers. We got to say yada. Good teachers, whatever. But it's a corrupt system.
But to your point about the corruption,
what we need.
Yeah, to your point about that. One of the points that the auditor made was that Governor Beshear's state-level education executives lack a unified vision for student success in K-12 education, post-secondary education, and careers.
That's right.
This This is a bombshell.
Well, as soon as they put that out there, then they would hold themselves up to some sort of standard. That's all they want. They just don't want to hold themselves to any sort of standard.
Yeah.
So if they had a model of what it would look like to actually educate children, then they would have to, work towards that goal. And then they don't want to be held to any accountability. It's a total counter to the whole teachers union's mentality.
That's right.
Try to fire a teacher for not teaching a student.
Yeah. Well,
impossible.
They have rubber rooms for teachers that commit sexual crimes and other felonies.
Yeah.
They keep them on the payroll in
That's
many
right.
states and many places.
That's right.
And even here, because it's so hard to fire a teacher, it's so hard to get rid of them.
Yeah. Government-run schools. It's not public schools. These are government-run schools.
And here's another one. KD's plan for improving education lacks measurable benchmarks for gauging student success. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be pretty cynical here. I have a right to be cynical after diving into this for years, but this is intentional. This, in my view, is intentional by the system, because if there is not, Bob Scott, if there is not a specific plan, specific benchmarks, specific goals, then the system can wiggle and squirm its way out of any attempts at accountability by the legislature, by parents, by the students themselves, anybody. It's not about whether students are getting educated. It's about whether we can protect the system and protect our turf.
Well,
right,
Jim, think about it. $250 million that they would have simply had to do the proper paperwork and filing to get, and they let that pass by. I mean, it's either complete, sheer, utter incompetence, or it's something more nefarious and being politically motivated. My jaw hit the floor when I heard that number. I mean, for a state like Kentucky, $250 million is a huge amount of money.
Especially when they turn around and say the legislators haven't properly funded or haven't increased funding.
Hey, we need more money. We need more money. But what about the money you're just sitting on the ground right in front of you? You refuse to pick up. But we need more money.
And guys, I got to tell you something about the SEEK funding. Let me tell you. Now, the SEEK funding is the state portion of funding that follows each student in Kentucky. And the school districts get many different funds. That's only one of them. That's where a lot of the attention has been. But did you know that if a student leaves a public school and goes to another school district, and there hasn't been, and this has been in the past, but there hasn't been an agreement between the districts for the SEEK funding to follow, the SEEK funding stays in Frankfurt.
Oh.
And it doesn't follow the student, even though the money is for educating the student. And they're going to another public school in Kentucky for years and years, millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, which had been designated to educate those students in a public school district in Kentucky, were not released to the school district they went to simply because the bureaucrats in the school districts couldn't agree that that student should be allowed to come. Instead, those parents had to pay, in many cases, tuition for that student to attend another public school district in Kentucky, even though those dollars are for what? They're for educating kids in public schools. I mean, what do you think?
It's ridiculous. It just shows that they're just there to feed the system, and so it's not about the kids. It's not a parents and kids first mindset, and that's why we have to change. That's why your heroic work on trying to get school choice in Kentucky is it's going to pay off, and so because the system is just going to keep showing itself, and people are eventually going to get it.
Well, what I love
that government schools are not the answer.
What I love about this is we've had a chance to talk about this. We've had a chance to expose this.
Right.
Even though Amendment 2 lost and all that, but we've had a chance to get this on the front page. It's been at the top of the fold. One other thing. Go ahead.
I just want to add this too. I like to try to change our language when we talk about the school system. These are not public schools.
These are governments.
These are government schools.
You're right.
And so these are government-run institutions. And what is a government-run well?
And these are government entities.
Government entities. Yeah, these are government schools
right.
teaching your kids, and they're just there's inefficient as the driver's license
Well,
system
if one
in
out of
Kentucky.
three, if, in most businesses, if you only had success 1 out of 3 times, how many CEOs and presidents and people would keep their jobs in that situation? And yet 1 out of 3 of our kids can read proficiently. Fewer than that can do math proficiently. Okay,
get rid of them.
here's one other point that I want to just a couple of minutes on Independence Day here, but KDE KDE lacks a comprehensive strategy that shapes its approach to school improvement. So not only do they not have a vision for this, they have no strategy for completing this. Folks, check out this auditor's report on the Kentucky Department of Education. There's a lot more here. You can find it on the auditor's website. Just go to Google and Google Kentucky State Auditor, and you'll find it right there. Okay.
The problem. Jim,
15
is the school unions are the ones that are really running Andy Bashir in this state. It's the teachers' unions.
That's right.
That's
they
the
have
problems.
stood in the way. They have stood in the way of improvements. They've threatened court action for making improvements in our education system. It's nonsense. It's got to end. It's got to end. Well,
and there's a reason Kentucky. This is awful, but we rank in the lower third of metric. As far as metrics are concerned, of schools in the United States of America. We're in the lower third.
But to hear the left, we're making great improvement. Okay, now I want to spend the last minute and 45 seconds on Independence Day, guys. Look, it's going to be July 4th. This is my last show before Independence Day. This is really important. It's our 249th birthday. And I want to say this year, what really I want to point out quickly is our special relationship with Israel goes all the way back to our founding. Let's not forget about this. We've heard a lot about Israel. There's been a lot of argument, debate about, a lot of heat about how much we should support Israel. But as I got to thinking about Independence Day and the connection we had, that if it had not been for Haim Salomon, if it had not been for early Jewish financiers who financed the American Revolution, who went bankrupt financing it, who played a significant role in our freedom and the fight for our freedom, we would not be here today. So it's really difficult for me to say we can be too supportive of Israel. And I know we've got to be careful about what we spend, and we've got to be accountable with tax dollars. But Tom Faubus, just a few seconds.
Yeah.
Am I right about this? We should thank God for Israel and how they helped us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. It's sort of a front line of Western values in that part of the world.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, we owe them a lot. However, we don't want a foreign government to have too much undue influence.
Yeah, but let's recognize.
But I'm all about supporting Israel.
And thank you all.
That we're doing.
That's right. Let's recognize their contribution. Let's be mindful.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us. Join us again tomorrow. Bob Scott will be here tomorrow. Thanks.
Good show.